शो का नाम है द ऑल्टरनेट व्यू. होप you're all doing very very well. दोस्तों आज के शो पे we're talking about cricket as always, but after a long time we're talking about टेस्ट क्रिकेट, क्योंकि जैसे कि आप जानते हैं काफ़ी समय हो चुका है जब से भारतीय क्रिकेट टीम ने कोई टेस्ट मैच खेला है. नॉट दैट they're playing anyone any time soon, पर आपने देखा होगा कि परसों खबर में आई थी कि हाउ कैन इंडिया मेक द वर्ल्ड टेस्ट चैंपियनशिप फाइनल. तो आई सेड हाँ, आफ्टर अ लॉन्ग टाइम मुझे मौका मिला है टेस्ट क्रिकेट के बारे में बात करने के लिए. आई थॉट हु बेटर टू गेट देन समवन who's got a book which is just coming out. Amrish Kumar, CEO and MD of Ritu Kumar, the very famous Indian fashion label. उनकी पहली किताब called Gods of Willow. It is just released, and since I know what a big Test cricket fan he is, and his book does reference Test cricket on several occasions, I thought it'll be a good chance to get Amrish on the show and talk about his book, but also get his views on how this possible, remotely possible, even India Pakistan Test फाइनल हो सकता है. दूर की बात है बिकॉज ऑफ कोर्स एज इन क्रिकेट एंड इन दीज बिग टूर्नामेंट्स देयर इज कॉम्बिनेशंस एंड परम्यूटेशंस, बहुत सारी चीज़ें हमें 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 देखना पड़ता है, हमें तोलना पड़ता है. But when I read articles and I saw that yes, technically there is a mathematical chance of India there, I said, something is going on. So let's see how it goes, dosto. Any second now, Amrish will join. I've started the show. If we can just get Amrish, just see what's happening. Just check what's happening here. Seems to be a bit of a sag. We will figure this out. I've got a request now from Amrish. There we go. Let's get him onto the show now. Amrish, welcome. How are you?
Jamie, nice to see you. I'm well, thanks. How are you?
Very well, very well, very well. How's your day been so
Excellent.
far? I know you were traveling.
Not bad. I've just flown in from Bombay. Otherwise, all good. It's raining everywhere, but other than that, I'm good.
I'll take the rain. It's been a fairly dry spell here in Delhi NCR. Well, Amrish, first of all, thanks for your time. Welcome to the show and congratulations on your new book. What kind of emotions are you going through? Are you a wreck? Are you calm?
No, it's fun actually. I'm not a wreck at all. It's not something I've expected to do. So now that I've done it, I'm just enjoying the whole process. It's a good laugh. Every all of this is new. I've never really had to speak about writing a book. So yeah, it's all fun. I get to speak to people like you. It's just good times.
Awesome. You have worn many hats. You seem to be a fairly creative person. I know this book from the very little that I know. It spanned many years. There was no real plan that you said to write this book, but still, just talk us through where the idea came from, the characters, because I know the two of us are roughly the same age, so it's an India which we both experienced, we both lived in. But just to go back to the start of the book, how did the idea come from?
Yeah, I don't know. The actually, it was not. It was never an idea for a book. It was an idea for a film. I was doing a grad degree many years ago, and I always had in mind to go into the entertainment world. And I've dabbled with a record label and stuff like that, and it was always in my mind that I wanted to get into the entertainment business part of things. So I was doing a grad degree in LA at the time, and it's just movies everywhere. So I did a minor in that. So then at that time, I don't know how it happened. I know it was just me and a friend walking around the streets talking about if we were to create a story, what it would look like. And I've always been a great fan of a coming of age genre. When someone discovers life between certain ages. And I was also a big fan of uh, books like Fever Pitch by Nick Hornby and stuff, which actually equated sport with life because
Yep,
as
yep.
you said, we grew up in a specific time which attributed to a lot of change in our country, right? The 90s, when you describe it now, when I was writing the book and I was sort of thinking back in those days, it's incredible what a sea change our generation has seen because I remember there was no TV when we were kids, right? There was matches used to. I mean, some of the matches I've listened to and sort of imagined vividly in my head came from radio, and then
Yep.
from there and seeing the big Pepsi sign start, and then seeing, you know, there were beauty queens and just 25 channels where you didn't have any and advertise. So anyway, that whole gamut of experience,
Yeah.
and coupled within that was the only thing that really mattered to any of us, which was the fate of the Indian cricket team. So I just thought it just sort of the alchemy of that idea started to come about, and I wanted to create a story where it was a coming of age. It was a bit of a hero's journey. Uh, so I had thought of the first half of the book
Mm.
essentially, and it was just sort of scribbled on a notepad. And when I say book, it was a film, and it was scribbled on a notepad and just left there. And you know, it's that was it's. I'm not even going to tell you how many years ago it was, but it was decades. So, and it was always sat there, and I tried many other things in between that time. And then COVID happened, and somehow this scrapbook. I've lost most things in my life over the years, but this one I
Uh,
just. And the scrapbook always ended up being at the top of my shelf whenever I moved houses, whenever I COVID happened, I was looking at paint dry, you know, like the rest of us were, and then I thought, let me see if I can write this. So I
mm.
wrote a page, I wrote 2 pages, I wrote 3 pages, and I have a friend Priya who's a publisher, and I started sending it to her and I said, you know, am I wasting my time? What should I do? And she said, no, it's actually there's something here. Keep going. And then before I knew it, I had written half a book. The second half of the book was harder because I had no clue how to. I knew how the ending was going to be, but I had no clue how to get there. I only knew up to the point where the guy had to, without giving too much away, where you know
Yeah.
all the forces conspired against him, but he had to find his way back somehow. And that bit I hadn't really figured out. So that part was a little harder because I had to rewrite it 3 times because the ending was never quite right. The process of getting there was not quite right. But you know, it was a fun experience for me because it was something that I never thought I'd do. So there was no pressure. It was just fun.
I'm also trying not to give too much away in the questions I ask to you, Amrish. It's it's a book. It's not a book about cricket from start to finish. Cricket is there. It's a key part, but it's so much. I mean, you have fanaticism, you have religion, you have politics, you have that changing India post Manmohan Singh's. How the economy was opened up, and I think it acted because I was a teenager when that happened, so I can relate to so much of it. And of course, there's the cricket. What was the biggest challenge? Because I can assume that a lot of it is your recollections, your first-hand experiences. I read somewhere that you have never spent that much time in Hyderabad, the city which it's based in. What was the biggest challenge for you to keep that narrative flowing from start to finish?
You know, you're quite right. It's a human story. Things like cricket and the setting of India at that time is kind of the staging of it, and of course, it has some part to play in the obstacles the protagonists face. But really, at the essence of it, at the heart of it, it's a human story. It's a coming of age story. It's a story of growing up, and I think that's what makes it universal. You could have the same story with a different set of metaphors. It could be something else and not cricket, you know. So I think the heart of it is the human story. And so to answer your question, the hardest thing, or sort of the more challenging thing, was to stay true to that and to make sure that that narrative, that story, was cohesive,
Yes.
and that story was hit the right chords. I mean, I know you've read the book. The motivation was to, like you said, show put the hero through all those things in life that we learn, whether it's falling in love,
Yeah.
uh, sort of the disillusionment of things that you thought were true, family, friends who change, and then the change within you. So all of those things. So that was really what was challenging.
I like I said, 80s, 90s, I've also been through that. And I'm a sucker for something that takes me back to those points. I'm a sucker for nostalgia. I think nostalgia sells. In your estimation, Amrish, what is it about nostalgia that sells in any kind of form, be it literature, be it film, because it's something which a lot of people are instantly drawn to. Hey, this book's about something which I perhaps have seen, I perhaps have been through. Were you aware of that when you were throughout this whole creative process?
Yeah, I think subliminally I was aware of that. It wasn't what I was pandering to, but I think
Uh,
the idea, the coming of age idea, is in its heart recognizable, and you can see yourself in it. I mean, for example, it's not a space movie where it's you see the great heroes, etc. Coming of age story like this is something that everybody sees as part of themselves in, so therefore it's more relatable, and I think that's what it is. So yeah, it had to feel real, you know.
it does feel very real. It feels very lived in a sense that these aren't like, personally speaking, these aren't characters I've met. Be it Kabir, be it Natasha, be it Burman, even someone like a Gaude. And again, I don't want to give too much away here, but it has that worn in, lived in feeling. So I want to say, well done for your first book. When you I know that I mean, from our brief chat, you're in a phase now where you feel like you're watching more Test cricket than more T20. Back then, of course, there was no T20; it was Tests, and one days were huge. In this time, the change that India saw, be it global television, you mentioned the Pepsi ads, the rise of Sachin Tendulkar, his link up with someone like a Mark Mascarenhas. Cricket was perhaps never more stronger in India. As you were researching it, I'm sure you have a lot of it is like muscle memory. What were your impressions of India as a cricket team that time? Because we started to win a lot more than, say, in the 80s.
You know, if you're a diehard fan, you're never winning enough, and you always went into a game with the eternal hope, with the butterflies in your stomach, that what if this time? But somewhere in the back of your mind, you always knew that they were going to screw it up. I mean, that's essentially the
Very true.
essence. That's the essence of being a fan. All right. So, and India's particularly more than, well, I don't know. That's perhaps I don't know enough about other teams and how they've felt, but India seemed to give us glimmers of hope all the time, but something would go wrong, right? So we lived essentially 20 years of our lives is going through this experience that has essentially shortened our lives with the amount of stress that it caused us. But the I think what is interesting in the book is even through that period, the 90s, I would say because of one weakness or the other, we were never favorites, really. I mean, except for maybe Zimbabwe, etc. We
Sure, sure.
were always on the edge, right? 2001, which is when the book ends. Um, the story after 2001, things changed. It became a little more hopeful. You know, the I think from one specifically with the induction of better bowling. Well, we had good. I mean, I want a better bowling, but we had like Zahir Khan who would take a bunch of wickets
Sure. Yep.
at regularly when he went overseas. Uh, we still got clattered around a fair bit, but there was a little more happening, and I think the fitness levels changed, the professionalism changed. I think we also went through the a cathartic change after the match fixing. Things got a little more serious in terms of what was happening at the back. But we went through a pretty dark period for a little while there, and that was the 90s. That was the late 90s. So that's what my lived experience is. And as far as researching the book is concerned, honestly, I didn't have to, because all those memories are embedded.
Wow.
Um, all those disappointments and those little flushes of joy are embedded in me. So it was not very difficult to. The only thing I had to check was the actual dates, but the actual
Wow.
writing of the actual writing of the what happened in the cricket, that was it's all still there.
Still there. Did you find yourself perhaps hopping onto YouTube to watch a few things which maybe it was a little foggy around the corners?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I used to call it research, but a lot of hours were spent
Uh,
rewatching the same stuff, like the Desert Storm, Tendulkar's Desert Storm. Then
yep.
finding footage from the 1990 tour of England.
Hmm.
Then obviously the 2001 Calcutta match I've rubbed raw. I mean I think I watched that. It's as regular as religion for me. I mean I watched that since it happened on loop every month or so. I watch it. So some of those things were, yeah, well embedded. Other things, yeah, I did have to look a little bit.
I also like in the book how the protagonist's mood is sort of linked to how the team does. Like, like you use passages from 98, and, the Desert Storm you mentioned. It's sort of almost reflective of what he's going through in his own life. And every time life throws him a curveball, how he comes back, it is in a way reflected in the mood of how the national team is going. And I like the fact that you just said that it ends at 2000 when Indian cricket did it went through a dark phase. Our lead character here also has a couple of dark, I wouldn't say phases, maybe dark moments and moments of self-doubt. But the way that the book ends there, maybe there's something in the works, how the way that Indian cricket changed, and with that 2001 series, which to my mind is arguably the greatest Test series that I've watched. Do you see yourself perhaps the next time you attempt? Would there be a continuation? Because I asked because I was not aware that you'd actually envisioned this as a film first. But reading it, I was probably a chapter, and I'm like, I think there could be a Netflix or some kind of a web series in this.
Yeah, you see, I'm not a writer, so I have no idea. This was all a bit of an experiment for me. So if you
Worked out
read the
well.
book, it reads like scenes because that's how I pictured them. I actually,
Uh-huh.
I actually, because the original concept was scenes, I'd written down scenes and little bits of dialogue.
Yeah.
So for me, every part of that book was delivered like a scene in a film, and that's how I pictured it when I was doing it. Um, so are you asking about a sequel?
I don't want to use that word, but the way that this ends, it has a direct link to where Indian cricket, in a sense, one chapter ended, and there's this whole new chapter. And since I know how much of a cricket fan you are, I thought maybe if there is a sequel or something, it would pick up from that same time.
Well, it would have to, or you'd skip a period and start a little bit later. I don't know. I've not thought about it really,
Yeah.
but I'm glad you picked up on the fact because I used cricket as a tool, as a metaphor for his life, and made it. I mean, it's just a device that I chose to use
Yeah.
because it kind of reflected my own life, I suppose.
Interesting. How how personal is the book? I'm not talking about just the cricket references, but the fact that you transplanted your main character in a city where you never, I'm sure you've visited, but you never spent a long time. Barring that, how much of are there any certain characters which are you in the book?
Yeah, so my friend Priya, the publisher again, she told me that everyone's first book is the story of themselves, and I suppose to a large extent some of the situations that the protagonist is in borrow from things that I have seen. I mean, it's natural, right? Because particularly since it's a book that it's like a real uh, narrative of a person growing up. So yes, of course, I borrowed from things that I've seen. So, for instance, I don't know Hyderabad at all. I had to research that. I know why I chose Hyderabad because of, as you said, there was that. It's an old place. I wanted it to be an old place. I wanted it to be a city, but still a city that's built on millennia of history. I wanted it to be a place that had a an ancient sort of tapestry of faiths because that's so critical to who we are. And I obviously didn't want it to be Delhi, Bombay, or it's too. They're too large for this kind of setting. I
Yeah.
wanted it to feel like a small town and be a big town at the same time. So I chose Hyderabad for that reason. But like Kabir, when I finished university, I moved to Bombay too, and I saw similar things to what he did, to the way what was going on, and the same way it's such a new onslaught for somebody
Yeah.
at that age. So I borrowed from that in my life, and obviously the cricket. The memories of cricket in this book are my memories essentially.
Did you have any certain? I mean, was there a batsman or a bowler which you sort of left an imprint on you when you first started watching this game?
Yeah, Viv Richards. I mean, was the first guy. It was just
Wow,
Viv Richards, and for bowlers it was Dennis Lilly, I think, and Malcolm Marshall. Those guys when I
legend.
first started. Um, as far as the Indian team is concerned, anyone basically anyone could do well. I mean, obviously, From the day Sachin picked up a bat, you wanted him to break all the records.
Yeah, yeah,
But yeah, anyone would do really.
yeah. I remember the first match I watched was '87. I think it was Richard's last tour, and I think my father knew that this was going to be his last tour. I was a kid. I didn't watch cricket that time, but I had this memory of going to the Wankhede and being in this sea of people. What's your first
No
memory?
way. Because my dad took me to that same series to the Kotla match
There you go.
where Van Sarkar scored 100. And
Yeah.
we were sitting at Square Leg, I think. And
Wow.
I remember we were sitting on just on the tunnel,
Uh-huh.
as the players come out. And I swear, this is the interesting thing. The thing that I recollect about that are the cages. It looked like a cage, the tunnel where the
Yeah,
batters walk.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It looked like you were in the Colosseum and wild animals were coming out. Obviously, the wild animals were the ones being held out, which was us. But the thing is, it was so. Uh, it was almost like being in a communist state, because of the way that very harsh architecture and the gray everywhere, and there's not a not a comfortable spot in the house. But
Yeah,
from there to today, really is a story about more than just cricket. It's a story about our country.
absolutely. I just want to draw your attention. We've got some viewers here saying, "Welcome to the show, Amrish." Thank you, guys. Please, if you have any questions for Amrish or myself, please ask them. Just to pick up on what you said, it's a journey of so much more. Sticking to Test cricket, how important, I mean, no, sorry, I'll ask that to you in a while. This graph from, let's say, 2001, because you mentioned this is when things changed. Saurav Ganguly, John Wright came, that 2001 series. 20 years later, literally, India was in the final of a world test championship. Many factors were behind that: captaincy, fitness, bowlers. You know more than anyone else who's been on the show what it, because you mentioned we didn't have fast bowlers in the 90s. Now we have 6 7 guys who could rock up any given day and probably give you at least a very good spell. Someone like a Bumrah or Shami will give you more than that. But this depth, how important was this World Test Championship to you? For me, it was a much deliberated and a very delayed call, because this game has been asking or shouting out for context. When you first found out that this WTC was going to be there, what was your reaction as a proper Test cricket fan?
Well, it was a mixed reaction. And it was a mixed reaction because um, there was a little bit of apprehension because of the nature of Test cricket, and we grew up on the idea of countries traveling to other countries, and it was such a big deal. I remember when India used to travel to Australia, it was a good month and a half that they were there, and you would follow them. And back in the day, we would follow them on radio and newspaper. It was just an event. Now with media and social, etc., everything is beamed into you in in an instant, which wasn't the way we had grown up with cricket. Now I sound like a fogey, but the point is that's why it's a mixed reaction, because that's my origin of
Sure.
the love for the game. But at the same time, the possibility of there being a crown champion is always a good thing, because it's always something that people can aspire towards, and it makes the watching a little more interesting rather than dead test series, which was essentially the problem. And the other
Absolutely.
thing that's very important, I think, is we need more and more countries playing the game. I mean, that's it's critical. So if you have weaker countries who play stronger countries or play each other, the interest will only remain in the game if there is essentially a goal that everybody's aiming for.
Yeah.
So that is a positive. The only thing that I was a bit uh, unsure about, and I still am, is having
Yeah.
that one test to decide them all, and also in a country that's there's so much that goes into it. Like that Test Championship final that we had with New Zealand, we were underprepared. New Zealand had already been there for a month.
Sure.
And Test cricket is it's a field game. I mean, that's the beauty of it. There are not that many left in the world. I mean, tennis is a little bit left. There's a field game, but there are very few games in the world where environment, atmosphere, climate, nature, where you come from, still
Correct.
plays a role.
Yep.
And I like that about cricket, and that's it's a very critical thing. So the odds are stacked a little bit against you if you're playing in a country where perhaps you haven't been, etc. So I don't know how they're going to fix that, but
Yeah.
it's something they need to fix. And I think it should be at least a three-test series,
Great. I
even
was
if
going to say, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, you just mentioned the field. I cannot think of any sport right now in 2022 where the playing conditions matter so much, right? You talk about, you can play through rain in several sports. You have retractable roofs in certain sports, but in cricket, the conditions matter like perhaps no other game, which is why you rightly said that yes, New Zealand were around for a good month. I think they won that series, the two test match series. India, yes, they were not there and they rocked up, but I just think how as important as conditions are, it's also how both captains read the conditions. And I was frankly surprised that Virat Kohli at that time misread the conditions and then actually picked the wrong team. And because we saw that how quickly they rectified that mistake in the next four test matches against England. They knew we're going to be there for six tests back then. The fifth one got postponed because of COVID. But
Yeah,
I don't even know another sport, Amrish, where one miscalculation can have such an effect across 5 days. So I put that down to also why India didn't win that match against New Zealand.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the beauty of it, right?
Yeah.
That's the beauty of it. Yeah. No, I
So
agree
now
with you.
we're so now we're at a stage where, like I said before you came on, I'm very glad that we're able to have this talk because yes, I'm talking to you about the book, but also I'm talking Test cricket, which I know the two of us have that in common because it's been like 2.5 months of shows just on T20 white ball cricket. So I'm very glad that we're here. So now after India made the first final last year, there was all talk about how is this cycle going to go. It has not gone so well because Virat lost form. Virat Kohli stepped away. India had a great chance in South Africa, up 1-0, then lost the next two matches. There's sort of been a lot of doubts cast over this team. How will Rohit lead when he's such an injury-prone player? KL Rahul is missing. Now we have Ravindra Jadeja. India have played, and this is for our viewers as well, they played the most number of tests. That is 12. They're at number 4 right now. We have Sri Lanka at 3, but Sri Lanka actually have a less chance of making the final than India do. We have Australia at 1, but it's hypothetically, mathematically, in this lovely but very, very confusing game that we adore. Is that not part of the problem? Because it's been leveled at the ICC for many years by fans, by former players, by media pundits, that they've actually complicated this game. Do you get the sense of the fact that we're even talking about a 4 and 5 ranked teams could usurp number 3 to make the final? Or are you okay with that? I think it's somewhat problematic.
I mean, I have less of a problem with that because that's also the great unknown about sport and the possibilities of that kind of thing happening. I mean, it happens everywhere, right? You have one off day, you have one penalty that bounces off the crossbar, and it can happen in any game, right? So that's part of sport and it's part of life, and that's fine. I think the bigger problem, which was what you alluded to before, is the calendars are too packed, and they're too sort of cloistered into making the right number of days for television and the right number of days. Now, I don't know what the right answer is, but the problem is when it's going to be like that, you're going to
Yeah.
have irregular playing conditions for different teams. Too many people on the pitch for too long, some people not enough, and so on and so forth. So I think that is the main reason why we've not been able to level out perhaps this idea of the Test Championship.
Yeah. I think also just to add on that, Amish, the ICC had a great chance to sort of simplify the point system. All they had to do was look at the English Premier League, have a home and away system, give points. I think somehow they got caught up in the weightage and adding percentage points, and then COVID came around, and all that was changed because the fact that India are at 5, but they have a greater chance to get there than the team ranked number 2 and 3 is somewhat confusing. I get the point you're making. If we look at it, and this is also for our viewers जो हमारे साथ यहाँ आज जुड़े हैं, India has 6 test matches left, 2 in Bangladesh in November and 4 against home. If they win all 6, Amrish, they could actually get to the final before the teams which are ranked higher. If we look at those two series, I think, and we had a brief chat about this before, that Bangladesh series in Bangladesh, that could be that proverbial banana peel on India's road to the final, you think?
Look, when was the last time we won 6 tests in a row? I mean, the only people who've won that many tests in a row are two
At home,
teams.
it's possible, but because these two are away, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah, Bangladesh is like home. I mean, let's be fair. It's not that far off, you know what I'm saying? But the thing
Uh,
is, and the thing is Bangladesh have got players for their conditions for sure. So it's not an
Winners.
easy, yeah, it's not an easy a foregone conclusion. But with our spinners, I think we've got a good chance. And also, I think the problem we've had really the last couple of years, and even the last Test Championship, is our batting is a bit brittle, and it's something
Yep.
that we need to really face it because we get bailed out by the occasional punt, extravaganza. But the thing is, it's been a long time since our guys went up there in the top five, put on 300-400 runs, which they should
Yeah.
consistently. And you can also argue and say it's across the world that bowling seems to have got better because scores are coming down. But
Batting has declined. Yeah.
yeah, but it's not necessarily true. I mean, England and Australia and all these guys with slightly less vaunted batting lineups have been putting those numbers up. So
Yeah.
I think we guys have become quite brittle. We had a great series against England, but again, it was one or two guys. We could have really put the nail in that series even before we left after the third test.
Yeah.
So our batting has been brittle. But so the thing is, against Bangladesh in these conditions, I think our batting it'll be easier for them because it's more like home.
Yeah.
So I think Bangladesh we could do it, but then expecting to come and do a clean sweep of Australia, even though it's
Australia.
at home, not that we can't do it theoretically, but it's just never been done. I mean, I can't remember the last time we did a clean sweep of any team at home. I think the last one I remember was England in '92. Oh, that's probably one after that. But oh yeah, Australia came last time and we did it to them, right?
No, in 2013 was the first time that any Indian team swept Australia 4-0. That was Dhoni's last home series against Australia. But the last time Australia came, they actually beat India that first match in on that rank turner in Pune, and India had to
Yeah,
fight out of their skins. India won the series, but they had to fight out of their skins. If you get a
yeah,
series like that, you can forget the World Test Championship. But
yeah.
just to, huh?
Where Axel
But no,
was
go ahead.
turning them square. I remember that. Yeah, okay.
It
So
was it
exactly.
was shocking. Yeah,
So four tests in a row. I mean,
very
listen,
tough, very tough.
it's it's never been done, really.
Stranger things have happened. But I just want to pick up on two things you said. You mentioned the batting being brittle. I think two or three players. You mentioned Pant, I think Rohit Sharma, and to some extent KL Rahul literally dragged this batting, and Pujara to a certain extent dragged this brittle batting for the better part of 2 years. Did you ever imagine that you'd be talking about an Indian batting attack being weak? Because traditionally the batsmen have always lorded, and it's been the bowlers who've been a little weak. That's one question. And the second thing is, I get asked, I get questioned, I see comments that the future of Test cricket. I'm actually not that worried, Amrish, because in all of this, in and stats prove that fast bowling has been at a higher level than it has before, and opening in Test cricket has never been harder. My view, and I want to get your view on this, is because the standard has dipped. Yes, teams are actually, there's a more level playing field, which is why you can see an Australia and England go to Bangladesh and lose a test match, right? You can see in Australia come here and win. Not many teams have won in India for a long time. 2012, England were down 1-0, they won. So my point is, yes, the standard has dipped, but it's still fairly competitive. What do you think about that?
Are you talking about the standard of the batting?
The Canada batting was the first question I had, because as an Indian fan, it's surprising that we're talking about India's batting being weak, because for the longest time, going back to as far as I started watching, the batting has always dominated India's bowling. Now we're going through a fact where our bowlers are performing much better than batting. So your take on that, first of all?
Well, I mean, I think we had the luxury of living through a slight golden age because before that our batting wasn't great. There was one Tendulkar and that's it. And Nazruddin scored some runs sometimes
Yeah.
when the edges didn't get caught. Then we had basically Dravid, okay, and Tendulkar and Dravid and Lakshman, and then we had Sehwag. So I think that period was very special for us. That's why everyone talked about our batting.
Yep.
But before that period, it wasn't like we'd go overseas and our batting would dominate because it was always a 50-50. But the thing that you're absolutely right, the most heartening thing is to see fast bowlers come, and I allude to this in my book several times. The fast bowlers coming out of the ranks, I think that it's just basically our facilities have got so much better. I mean, when we were watching cricket earlier, there was one MRF Pace Academy, and apparently in the cafeteria it was vegetarian. So you used to eat sambar and idli rather than eating chunks of beef, which is what everybody else was doing.
Yeah.
So that's what you can attribute to it. And of course, without doubt, the IPL and the ability of these guys to play with the best. So, but I think that question asked a few years ago would have got more sort of exclamations than now, because we're kind of used to it now. I think we've had a better lineup, bowling lineup, for what now, a good 6 7 years.
At least 5.5, 6. Yep, yep. Since Ishant 2.0, since Shami 2.0, since Bumrah coming in, since it's basically since Virat Kohli took over the captaincy, a lot of fast bowlers have improved under him. I'm not going to give him all the credit, but for me, it's that turning point, 2015. So my second question to you was, I know it's a little long winding. While perhaps the viewership of Test cricket has dipped, I'm not so fearful, Amrish, of the future of Test cricket, because to me it's gotten a lot more competitive because the standards have fallen. Right? India going overseas and winning is as much a sign to me as yes, we made progress, but other teams are not as good in home conditions. The era we grew up in, India often left on a flight and we had no hope. It's because the other teams have also dipped. I just find, and the fact that England go to Bangladesh 6 years ago and they draw the series 1-1. Australia go 2007, they draw 1-1. That was unthinkable when we were watching it much more. Bangladesh, oh, we're going to beat them. So the fact that teams are not getting whitewashed as much, that leads me to believe that it's still a fairly competitive game. I'm just saying, I'm not worried about Test cricket's future right now. What about you?
No, it's exciting for sure. I think more than it being a level playing field, the teams that you mentioned, India, Bangladesh, to some extent Pakistan, all of these sort of subcontinent teams, there was never a question of them putting up any fight at one time. I've gone back into the sort of history of the Ashes, for example, or well, the Ashes mainly, because that was the more regular contest, and it
Yep.
was always fairly even-handed. Of course, the Australians would be great for like 5 7 years, then the English would be good, which is what is happening now. So they were always competitive, but whenever they came here, it was a given that David Gower's team was going to win in '84, or whoever
Uh,
else's team was going to, you know what I mean? So I think the fact that the power structure of cricket has moved into the subcontinent because of the size of the market has
absolutely.
enabled IPL and everything else, and now the facilities and the commercialization and the media, our players are so much better, and the same for Bangladesh. The only sad thing is I wish the West Indies was back to what they used to be, but they're getting there. I feel
Yeah.
like they're green shoots now. The Windies are coming back. They're in a slightly different way. Now, I'm the eternal optimist. I'm like you. I'm hoping that Test cricket, which is the real test, is the most exciting part of the game, continues and thrives.
Yeah.
But the key thing is, outside of England and Australia, you cannot fill a stadium for Test cricket, even in India.
Fact.
And that's the scary thing. Like in India, you would expect the stadium to be filled. Yeah, there are enough people around. I mean, like go and sit in the stadium. It's not that, but it just doesn't fill up, and that then obviously has a repercussion for the money that can be made, and where the sponsors want to go, and so on and so forth. So that's something that is still an unanswered question. I don't know how we make it more exciting. It's in England and Australia have tradition in their Test cricket. It's something that and somehow we don't seem to have it in the way they do for to fill up those maybe going to our stadiums needs to be a little more fun and
It
less policed, and let's
I think a lot of it, Amrish, does come down to that. It's not. It's still because the BCI is not so worried about bums on seats. They make their money from somewhere else, so the turnstiles are not as important for them. Which is, I think, is that. Plus, you go to it. The last time that I took my son when he was a kid, it was just a bad experience at the Kotla. That's a big thing which you've raised, and I hope people change that because that could be one possible solution to what you're saying. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, they need to figure that out. We need
Yeah.
to fill up the stadiums in India. And Test cricket is exciting. I mean, it is the purest of the sport. I mean, it's never going to be
Yep.
T20, but
Yeah, no, I agree with you. One final question because we're totally out of time. Mathematically, it is possible that we see an India Pakistan WTC final. Highly unlikely, but it's a possibility. The fact that these two teams have not met for 15 years, Amrish, 2007 was the last series. That could perhaps spark people to come and watch. No matter where these two teams play, that would be a bit of a masala dream final next summer.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially if they play in Lords. I mean, that'd be great.
Outstanding.
Yeah, that'd be great. But it's not likely to happen, buddy. We're gonna have to look for something else.
Yeah, there you go. Amrish, absolute pleasure talking to you about the book. We wish you all the best for the success. You, everyone at Rolly, Gods of Willow is available. Please let people know how they can pick it up, where they can go, and we wish you all the best for this.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure being on your show. You guys can pick up Gods of Willow on Amazon. Just type Gods of Willow and it'll be there. As simple as that. And thanks so much, James. It was Jamie. It was a good time. Nice chat.
Thank you. All the best, Amish. Thank you. Take
Bye.
care. Bye. Bye. Bye.